welcome. We are continuing our theme today of blessed vulnerability. And the theme for today is blessed are those who feel alone. And of course, this is an interesting topic to invite people to share about. I guess gathering with you is our way of making sure you know you're not alone. But it also takes a measure of courage just to identify times in our lives when we have felt very much alone, and that can be in isolation or in a crowded room. And every one of us feels has that experience of being lonely or like feeling alone, I think, feeling isolated, set apart in a way that's not holy, maybe. So, we're going to hear some stories from our panelists who are up here this morning. Robak, Steve Summers, Gail Lancaster, and Tiina Buckaloo. So thank you all for being willing to do this. You have stories that we will benefit from, and I'm grateful for that. So Tiina, I'm going to start with you. Okay. And tell us your story.
Well, my family, my parents, my brother, who's 8 years younger than I am, and I, at the age of 12, came to the United States in 1952. I was born in Tallinn, Estonia, and that is one of the 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And when I came here at the age of 12, and those of you who have had children that age, or friends, or you work with kids that age, know that that is a time that most of us would not choose to go back to. But they can be very childish, or they can be very mature, and they flip-flop all the time. Well, I come to the United States at the age of 12, and one of the things that started happening to me at school was the other kids would start asking me a lot of questions. And of course, at the time, I had no idea why. But now, in retrospect, they wanted to hear my British English because we came here from England. Then my father took a small congregation down in southern Illinois, and part of the reason he got that call was that they were a German background congregation, and he could speak German, and they had German services once a month. Then one of the other pastors' families became our friends, and the mother gave my mom a pair of jeans for me. I thought I died and gone to heaven. I had never seen or heard of jeans before, but I had a pair, and that was just wonderful. The same family had their children taking piano lessons. And so in conversation with my parents thought, well, that's good, she can take piano lessons too. Well, that was fine until the piano was in the living room, there were couches and chairs there, and those of us who were waiting for our lessons sat in the same room. And the other children were playing the piano, and they were about my age. And I was going playing, and I'm not quite sure how, but my parents must have sensed it, or I must have been not wanting to go to piano lessons, because they let me quit before too long, and I was very happy about that. The school that I went to in the small town, the bus ran on the highway, and then we had to walk half a mile to where we lived. And another kid and I would we'd walk, and one of the early times when we were walking together, I would start going into our house and I said, "Cheerio." And he kind of looks at me like, what is she talking about? Is she talking about cereal or what? Well, in England, cheerio means bye, see you, and a very pleasant way to say goodbye to somebody. Then, because my name, Tiina, is spelled with a double I, the kids had a wonderful time. They wouldn't dot the I's and they would call me Tuna. Tuna. But in the Estonian language, as in Finnish and Hungarian, a long vowel sound is a double vowel. And so that's why Tiina is spelled with a double I. I never paid much attention to it until we got to computers. And now, if I go somewhere and they say, "What's your name?" and I say Tiina Buckaloo, you know, they type it in. "No, you're not in here." Well, Tiina is spelled with a double I, so they put that in. "Oh, there you are, okay." And then, did any of you have questioning Sunday before your confirmation? Okay. We had that down in Southern Illinois, and of course my dad being the pastor, he probably didn't want people to think that he was going easy on me, but there were only 2 of us in that class. And so the other girl and I each had to answer about, I thought it seemed like 20 to 25 questions. It was a long time, or at least felt like a very long time. And so that was another interesting experience. And then when it came time to go to college, my parents sat me down and said, "You will be going to Carthage College because we get a clergy discount there." Okay. Well, it turned out very well because that's where Neil and I met each other. But, you know, there was no choice to that. And so when my brother, 8 years younger, when it came time for him to go, you know, they visited several colleges and he chose St. Olaf and had a very good time there. So those are just some examples of times that even though there was interaction with people, there was also some feeling alone.
Well, and part of what I hear you pointing out too is that period of adolescence where you, on the one hand, need support and encouragement and guidance, and on the other hand, don't want any of that. So there's a way that you feel alienated because people are treating you as immature at the same time that in fact you may be less mature than you think, right? So, and then add to that an accent.
Absolutely.
And a life experience, because you didn't come direct, I mean, you came directly from England, but before that you had been a refugee.
I had lived in 6 countries when we came to the United States. This was the 6th one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of instability outside of your family. It sounds like your family was
and war.
stable. And war, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, did you ever have a sense that the kids around you were naive to the world? I think sometimes our aloneness can be by the breadth of our experience, right?
Yeah. Well, they were certainly inquisitive. So
they were curious about you. Was that okay, or did it sometimes feel like you were conspicuous?
Well, I was 12 at that time, and I did not have figured out what I have now by this age. So,
Yeah.
I was only 12 at that time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think this will be a theme that will continue, is this, that isolation doesn't always happen by being alone, right? Isolation can even happen when people have identified you in a certain way that limits you, right? So we'll put that on the back burner and see if it comes up again. Gail, would you share with us?
Actually, I was gonna kind of bring that up to the front burner
Good.
because I, maybe splitting hairs, but I differentiate alone from loneliness. Alone is a state of being. Loneliness is the emotional and all the baggage that comes with it. And I say that because I am inherently an introvert. And I can thrive at being alone. There comes points where I need to interact again, but I can go home oftentimes on a Sunday and take a 2-hour nap because I've been around people so much and need to.
It'll be 3 hours today.
That was, when I was in the parish, that was usually 3 hours. Can't be today because I've got a consent game.
Oh.
It's not till the
Is that what?
I think it's in the in.
Yeah, it's not till
So you
6.
got plenty of time.
I got flooded. So, alone to me is a positive thing. Loneliness is the painful piece of it. My background is I am an ordained United Methodist minister. There, I have finally blown my cover.
Did Elmer know?
Oh yeah, Homer and Phyllis knew the minute I walked in. And he says hi. I talked to him a couple of days ago. But I kept it under wraps when I first came to St. Mark's for some reasons that I'll get back to a little bit later. Now I say that my ordination papers are with the Methodists, but my heart's with the Lutherans. I become very, very comfortable here. So, grew up in Everett, Washington, just north of Seattle, and that was when they were two separate entities. We were kind of the country folk compared to Seattle. Yep, I grew up 2 miles from the 747 plant. Watched it get built, the Boeing plant get built, and watched the first 747 take off. That was pretty cool. And we heard them all the time as they fly. Grew up fairly urban area. Went to seminary in Los Angeles, California. And my first assignment was Orofino, Idaho. If you don't know where Orofino is, it's 50 miles up the Clearwater River. We used to say it's not the end of the conference, which is basically the equivalent of a sit-in. It's not the end of the conference, but we can see it from here. So here I am, newly minted clergy, having been largely in urban areas, in very rural Idaho. And single, female, clergy. We had 4 classifications, but I can't remember that 4
Well, the
classifications.
Methodist,
Oh yeah, the Methodist appointment system.
yeah. So you were
Where
appointed.
I was told, not appointed, I was told where to go. And I thought it was going to really be okay. I had said that I did not want to be in the I-5 corridor, which meant basically I would take anything in western or in eastern Washington. Thinking in terms of Tri-Cities, where I had been for a while. Pullman, when I came to school at Wazoo, I fell in love with eastern Washington, so it's like, this sounds good. Or Spokane, one of those places. And found out it wasn't an really easy place to be. Because, I think I put it in terms of because of expectations. Mine and theirs. I had this vision of Little House on the Prairie, the Waltons. This is what rural life is like, and this is, I kind of like this. Well, as a single female clergy woman in the appointment system, growing up on the west side, it was pretty lonely a lot of the time. I'm at that point 28 years old, moving to this town, very much a working class, very much like a lot of rural towns. The dating pool was not really huge, and I was ready to settle down. I had broken off one relationship in part to go to seminary. Part of it was he didn't think I should be doing it. But I got to the point where I wanted to not only establish some relationships within the congregation and within the community, but dating relationships. Pool's not really big. You're in a fishbowl. Everybody sees what's going on. And it was a little different than my single male colleagues, where they would go into a new town, a new church, and everybody's mother and grandmother and auntie, I see some nods going on, they know where I'm going, would start matchmaking. Never happened. Never happened in my 11 years in parish ministry. I think the best perception, the most positive perception, I don't know, was that you were like a nun. Yeah, so you didn't care about any of that and didn't do any of that sort of stuff. And you don't date in the congregation, or so they say, because that can get messy really fast. I did break that rule because he was about the only young man in town, close to my age, and we had shared faith experience in that. But we would have to go up to Moscow, Idaho, to even go out to dinner or a date. Because, Lewiston was I'm seeing this back there. Yep, exactly. It would be around town, probably before the meal was over. So go up to Moscow one night for dinner and dancing, and run into a newly widowed parishioner with his girlfriend. It's kind of like, are we gonna have to go all the way to Spokane? Well, and then if we go all the way to Spokane, all the time involved, that sort of thing, people are really gonna wonder if people are really going to talk. So I said, okay, that's it. No relationship. Is that a no and no?
It looks like it's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, where's I going? Oh, you know, also just in terms of small communities tend to be fairly close-knit, fairly closed. I'm coming in as an outsider. So it's always very hard to break into. You know, so
Yeah, and it's a very conservative logging-based community,
Thank you,
right?
thank you. The word I use for it, Lori won't let me use here. You know, and again, part of that, in terms of relationships, is, you know, the kids stick around, they're all paired off by the time they're 23, 24, and like I say, I'm 28 coming in here. But, you know, the loneliness revolved mostly around themes of relationship, you know, as I began to unpack this. And part of it was that feeling of being an outsider, being in the community but not of the community. And how long that takes. I underestimated how long that might take. So, I brought some cards to keep me
So
focused.
you were there for 2 years.
I was there for 2 years. The third one that's set apart is, and this happens across the church, I think I will be, this will be affirmed, that clergy are set apart. They're liturgically set apart for certain tasks, certain ministry, but oftentimes they are relationally set apart. And that, again, was very much the case there. You know, I was the professional prayer at Rotary. I was marrying and burying Sal. Did a lot of community, there's that word again, community funerals and weddings. You know, but it was always just kind of on the fringes, So, to hear where Lori was asking, toward the beginning of my second year, I asked for a move. That, you know, I just really, there were a couple of toxic relationships that I just needed to get far, far away from. And so, like I say, I asked for and received a move. Ironically, they wanted to move me from Orofino to OMAC. Which was even, even further away.
Frying pan to fire.
Yeah.
From the fishbowl to the stage.
Fortunately, unlike my introverted self, who would do what the bishop said, I said, I don't think so. And went from there, was assigned as an associate in Kennewick, Washington. That program, I don't even know if the bishop knew at the point I was appointed, but that program was in the process of doing away with their associate's position.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that until about halfway through my second year. So, I'm in the U-Haul again, up to Ellensburg. And I had always looked at campus ministry as a real possibility for at least part of my ministry. Because my best friend and mentor was in campus ministry. I'm partially the product of campus ministry. Was very close friends with the campus minister there in Pullman. And so, there was always that possibility. And so this ecumenical position came open, and I should have seen that warning sign too. It was only a half-time position. So I was half-time campus ministry, half-time associate. Well, this was end of the 80s, and there had been a real transition in college students from when I had been in college to that point. And it was a turn toward very, very conservative. The students didn't want to have anything to do with what they labeled a liberal, ecumenical, Protestant woman. And that was a big piece too for them. So, end of the year, they closed down that position. Gail's on the road again, back to Tri-Cities, which was something they normally didn't do. They didn't have you serve in a second church less than 20 or 50 miles from where you've been. Well, I was in Pasco now, that was just across the river. So, was there. Probably the church, well, no, I won't say that. It was the first time that I really kind of started to feel grounded in the church. Like, this may happen here, this may work. And at the beginning of the second year, we're going to half-time person. Do you want it? I'm single. I'm paying off seminary bills still. Yeah, this doesn't work. So, again, packed up the U-Haul. And actually this time, the church I went to moved me and came up to Spokane. So I got that part of my, I don't know which my vision is to get to Spokane. And was there, in a lot of ways felt very grounded, fairly well accepted by a significant portion of the congregation, and get to the beginning of year 3, and the senior pastor walks in and he says, I have just been asked to be a district superintendent, which is the bishop's cabinet, and they are the group that pretty much decides what your next assignment is, or if you stay in an assignment. And even though he theoretically couldn't do this, he says, and I'm going to ask that it be a coterminous position. So here I am, thinking of moving to third year, or third time, after 3 years. So if you've been keeping count, that's 5 appointments in 11 years. Part of that, and fortunately I'm seeing a change in the denomination, but there was a mythology of single pastors are easier to move than are married, because you're often dealing with a spouse's job and children moving school, that sort of thing. However, a married or a family, at least they are moving their primary social group and their primary support group. Mm-hmm. With every move, I would have to start from scratch. From everything from doctors, where I went shopping, to friendship group, you know, who do I go to when I need to talk to somebody? You know, going back to the Tri-Cities the second time was a little bit easier because I at least had some established network. But it still wasn't, you know, wasn't ideal. And when they came to me and said, this is going half time, we're moving you, I called the bishop in with the superintendent and I said, okay, I need to know this. Is it me? Or is it, I didn't say this to them, but is it the crappy appointment system?
Screwed up the finance.
I screwed up appointment system. You know, but I said, you know, if I am an ineffective pastor, let me know. Because one, my evaluations at each stage had not said that. And the other part was, you know, if indeed I have been labeled as ineffective, I'd rather go out under my own power rather than be pushed out. So, like you say, I moved to Spokane and decided when they approached me that I was going to be moving yet again, that I, again, said no. Went on leave of absence, established a ministry, what we call around, beyond the local church, in spiritual direction, because I had been through the program at Gonzaga and had a certificate in spiritual direction. Even that was not well supported by the denomination. And so for a second time, I decided, okay, I'm strong enough, this is a toxic relationship, I'm getting out of it. Didn't leave the denomination, you know, did not retire my credentials, and started attending a Methodist church in town after going to a lot of others and was basically, I would walk through the door, I was a known entity, which is part of why I did not share when I first came to St. Mark's that I was ordained. But, you know, they would look at me, and especially the smaller churches, oh, free associate pastor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or, oh, maybe she'll take the youth group. I've been there, done that. I just needed to be somewhere where I could be me. And that was large enough that those expectations would at least dissipate. And did wind up in a congregation here in Spokane, was actually there for a number of years, but began to realize several things weren't fitting for me, even to a point of, again, I would say toxic relationship. When we were yet again debating the whole gay ordination issue, said in a small group, your opinion is not welcome here.
Wow.
So, you know, I kept attending, but was really, really, really restless. And I found myself again and again and again and again. Skipping a Sunday, and then skipping 2 Sundays, and then skipping 3 Sundays. You know, just distancing myself. You know, and when Lori asked, how did you survive? My answer is, not real effectively. You know, I just kind of stuck around and took the pain, and finally got to a point, you know, and here's where the story begins, of, it was Holy Week 6 years ago, and I had pretty much not been attending even that Methodist church much. And I knew I didn't want to go there for their Holy Week services because they didn't like what they were kind of playing loosey-goosey with a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna try out some churches. And I wound up, and I don't know why it took me so long because I came to St. John's, I came to a lot of South Hill churches, even though I was on the North End. I came to St. Mark's for Maundy, Thursday. And it just felt right. I don't know what that feeling is. Started attending Saturday night services so I could be relatively anonymous. It's weird, anonymous but not anonymous. There's so few people there, but at the same time. And I would sit in one of the back pews. I would go out for communion, and when I came back, I didn't stop at the pew. I was out the door. So keeping that distance. And finally, by about the end of the summer, Eric beat me to the back door. And we have never quite figured out the connection, but he knew me and knew that I was clergy. And our conversation was kind of around that. It opened up some opportunities for some great conversations. Started coming regularly to the 8:30 service and just saw and felt a lot of things that I had not felt for a long time. Even though I come from fairly low church liturgically, there's always been something of the liturgy that has really resounded with me. I was not brought up with it. In a lot of ways was unfamiliar, but still, I was exposed enough that there's this type. One of the big pieces was watching how many people were included in leading worship. It wasn't just the clergy performance. Readers, liturgists, communion stewards, the whole bit. So, I stuck around.
So after 11 years
Mhm.
with 5 moves,
Mhm.
and then
About 15 years before
15 years you came
I came here.
here.
And
your story, although Tina, I think that yours has an aspect of this as well. The systems that we are a part of, each of us, that intend to, like, I'm thinking about the Methodist system of appointment is when they move families, they're thinking this is going to involve kids being dislodged from schools. It's like the path of least resistance is to target those who are single.
Exactly.
And
And the young ones, because they think we'll say no. Oh, that we won't say no.
won't say no.
You just can't do that.
Yeah, right. And you want to stay as part of the system and continue to serve in the capacity of pastor. And you also you also understand that humility and cooperation are part of demonstrating your faith, your piety, right? So I think there's a lot in your story that tells the story. It's not just a story of singleness. It's also about how each of us gets captured by systems that can hold us captive rather than free us, right?
As soon as everyone started talking in terms of systems. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
that's it.
I'm gonna ask us to move on so we can
Yeah, I
hear
was gonna say.
stories.
I'll do this.
More of your stories. So Steve, would you share with us?
Sure. I was not ordained, and I did not have parents that were pastors, but I have a unique story with with childhood trauma. My dad died when I was 6 years old. My brother was 4, and from a young age, I always felt different than all the other kids that had fathers. And I think it's actually become more commonplace to have a single parent, as a primary caregiver. But in the 70s, it was not very common. And so I think my brother and I, we always felt a little different in that respect. And I'm more of an introvert, as Gail said. I tend to be, I like being alone. I'm around people all day, and so my alone time is precious and it's therapeutic. So when I'm alone, I don't feel lonely necessarily, because like today I was out running and I feel the presence of God, the sunlight of the Spirit, and that keeps me going. And there's just something about being outdoors that it's rejuvenating. And we weathered the winter, and now it's starting to get warmer. And so all through my adolescence, I kind of felt like an outsider, and I think it's just part of for a long time, or in some ways, I always felt like introverts were losers, were the ones that that were not very outgoing, and they were the wallflowers and the people that had character defects, and I still I wrestle with that. You can't be this extrovert if you're an introvert at heart. And so I think when I went to WSU and this is part of my journey again, and I don't I used to be ashamed of the choices that I made and things that I did, but now I draw strength from those experiences, and I can hopefully help others by sharing some of that pain and that trauma that I went through. But I started drinking really heavily when I was at WSU. Yeah. And my drinking went on for another 30, 40 years. And I've been now sober for almost 10 years. And part of the recovery was reconciling the past, trying to make amends, and to try to come to terms with all those angry and the feeling of being alone. And so part of my therapy is not ignoring the past. That idea of swimming in a sea of denial. My family lived in that space. You just suppress all that pain and don't deal with it. But it's festering. It's just under the surface bubbling. And I'm sorry for the metaphor, but it's just a festering wound. And so for me,
this is your family of origin.
Yes. I'm not talking about Jane.
I thought it's important that one of the things that you brought up, Steve, is that it was not, it would be one thing to have just a single parent, but to also have, and I can imagine for little kids, that something went wrong, Dad is not here, and it's not because he's living someplace else, he's not here, right?
Yeah.
So you carried that, and no wonder, without conversation, that it would still be there.
Yeah. And so, anyways, what I'm, where I am now, and I want to give Ward time to talk.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, but I've my whole life, tried to put on a happy face and to try to, my mom, she drives me crazy. She says, "Why can't you be happy?" And I think that's like the worst thing you can say to somebody, because I think part of finding contentment or happiness is healing those wounds and going through those things and talking about it. And you put on a fake smile, but it's meaningless if you can't, come to terms with and manage that stress or that, feeling of inadequacy. And so I just recently started going to therapy again, and it's been really good because the guy's saying that it's okay to, feel sadness or not to, fake your way through life and, and put on a happy face even though you're, and so anyways, I'm really grateful that, I think the biggest thing for me is asking for help and admitting that I'm not a superhero. That I can, ask for help from others. I can, confess when I'm struggling, and I can seek help from my fellows, and my faith is a big part of that journey. So, anyways, I could talk, a lot more about the recovery process, but I'm grateful for all of you, and thank you for letting me speak.
Watch his call story. He has a good more of this.
Yeah.
About toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that you are talking about having recognized is that it's kind of a universal, it's a big conversation that's going on in social psychology right now about introverts and extroverts, and that we've made it not okay to be an introvert, and the illusion that you can't be outgoing and be an introvert, but how that isolates as well, because you're always trying to be on this side of good, right?
Introverts can become great performers. Yeah, that's how I felt in the pulpit oftentimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you put on the happy face.
Yeah.
But when what's required to put on that happy face is to be medicated, then you have a problem. And part of it is not accepting that I can't do that right now. That's not where I'm at.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
Yeah. Word.
Are you sure? I mean, look at the time.
No.
Nice job.
No.
Sorry, thank you so much.
Thank you for your story, Gail. Your story really touched me, and yours as well. So, Tiina, yours not so much. This thing with aloneness, solitude, and I've had to do some thinking about this, not just for here today, but being that I practice as a psychologist and I'm ordained. So, and then, having that identity and then trying to protect it, because it's like, well, you put yourself on a dating app, and what happens if one of your clients, someone that's looking for you, and now they got all your story right there. So that part of my life is new for me, and I experienced some very profound, deep loneliness in 2016. It was August, when my wife of 27 years declared that she wanted a divorce. It was the day after I got my license as a psychologist. So it just tore the floor out from underneath. I like being alone, and I like solitude. I even would seek it out. But in that moment and the years that followed that, it felt lonely, very, very lonely. I don't think that loneliness was more deeply experienced than when I moved in my mid-20s from Edmonton, Alberta, where I was living with my brother, rooming with my brother. We played in the Christian band together. I played guitar, he played bass. We had a community, we had a church, we had friendships, and I had family in Edmonton, and I moved from there all the way to St. Catharines, Ontario, which was about 2,000 miles away, to a community where I didn't know anything, to a seminary that was the exact opposite of the seminary that I came from in Edmonton, very much more closed off. And I yearned for that community. Even though my love interest at the time, which would become my wife, Krista, moved to be in Buffalo because she was American, or she is American. And we were able to commute back and forth. Even though she was there, I still felt lonely because I didn't have my community. Yes, she was there, but my brother, my friends, my family, it just felt very lonely, but not as lonely as those few years, I don't know, maybe 3 years it was after Crystal left. There were days and nights where I just howled with sadness and sobbing, seeing 27 years just change into something that I couldn't imagine. So I am more comfortable with the loneliness now, and even enjoy. So there's two of my kids that go back and forth between my place and their mom's place, which is she's just like about 3/4 of a mile down the road. They go there for 2 weeks and they come and then they come back to my place. And when they leave, I'm almost looking forward to them leaving. And when they're coming back, I'm going, oh, I'm not going to have that long. But it is a nice balance. And actually, back about 6 months ago, one of my kids, one of my boys, well, my only boy, because I have a transgender daughter, and I'm still trying to get familiar with that, even though she declared that about the same time that Krista declared divorce. So it's been 6 years. It's still been an adjustment for me to raise him as a son, and now he's she. My son almost got a job and was on his way out. He went to the job, he already was planning to move out within the month. It was January, and he went and worked for a day and he quit. And so I was grieving him leaving. He wasn't out the door. I was already thinking about, oh man, he's not gonna be around anymore. It'll just be me and Joa. And then he, didn't get the job, and he's just started working now after being out of work for a number of months, a number of years. So the encapsulating the aloneness and the loneliness and the solitude, it's multidimensional, and every time I start thinking about it, it gets more deeply layered, and all of your stories have given me more of a context of how multi-layered it is. Very basically, it can be really enjoyed, and I see that with my clients, or it can be deeply suffered. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a community, you may or may not be looking for it. You might be self-isolating, not liking being isolated, but doing it anyway in a community.
Yeah.
Or you could be on the other end where you're part of a community and you would like some alone time. People all day, and you're just like, okay, I'm looking forward to it. You can be in a marriage and feel completely isolated and lonely. Or you can be in a marriage and just need some time away from you. I did that in the mornings. I would get up. I knew that Krista wasn't going to be up on Saturday morning. Early, I was up. I did meditation, greeting, just being alone. But once she was gone, I don't do that as much anymore. I'm not seeking it out anymore. It's just part of my life. And at times I miss it. I go downstairs and my meditation area is there, and I go, I gotta get back here. Thank you.
Board, you bring up so many topics, and one of them that occurs to me is that each of us has this web of experiences that all intersect at us uniquely, right? That, for instance, for you, you can be well-trained in what people can do to find comfort in community or get comfortable with themselves. But it's a way different thing for you to do that for yourself than to help others see the necessity of it, right? And that with that intersection of all those experiences that culminate in Ward, that there is this way in which you have to, and Steve, you kind of alluded to this too, where you just have to say, this is who I am, and this is where I'm at, and I can't be that other thing, whether it's, I can't be an extrovert, or I can't not be in this moment of grieving, right? That I have to sit with myself, because not sitting with the grief and the pain is not true, right? So the sobbing is where you need to be. It's not where you want to be, but it is a necessity of recognizing who you are and where you're at, right? And I wonder if sometimes the loneliness that we experience is even from ourselves, is being alienated from ourselves, right?
Not knowing yourself, not being.
And being afraid of yourself, being afraid of yourself. And here is, and in the face of that, then what do we have? A Lord who walks us, who's with us even through the darkest valleys. A God who says, fearfully and wonderfully made. Like, how do you sit with that, right? So that that the God we ask to know us sees everything, even the things we don't want to see.
I'm gonna need to steal you.